Hi, I'm going to go over a couple examples from the homework for 7.3, and hopefully this will be helpful for you tonight. So I'm going to start by going over number 30 from page 452. So I copied number 30 out of the textbook, and there's more than one way to do this. I'm going to choose to look at it this way. I'm going to deal with the negative exponent first, but there's more than one way of tackling this problem. So what I'm going to choose to do is I'm going to take this negative exponent and I'm going to put this entire entity here is being raised to the negative 3. So I'm going to move it to the denominator. So I'm going to have 4g raised to the positive 3 now. So now it's, rather than it being a negative exponent, it's now positive. Now it's happy. It's been moved. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the power of a power rule, and I'm going to raise everything inside this to the third power. So each of these numbers have an exponent on them already. So when I have a power raised to a power, I multiply the exponents. So I'm going to do 3 times 1 is 3, so that's 4 to the third power. And g to the 1 times 3 is 3, so that's g to the third power. And now I'm just going to simplify it by taking the constant and evaluating that. So 4 to the third power is 16 times 3, which is 64 g to the third. And so now I have my answer with no negatives. So now I'm going to do number 38, so I'm going to copy that down. So what's being done here is I'm just being asked to rewrite the expression without negative exponents. So let's examine everything here. The 1 has a positive exponent, the invisible 1. The 8 has a positive exponent of invisible 1. The x has a negative exponent, so that one's going to need to move. And the y has a negative exponent, so that one's going to need to move. But everything else can stay where it is. So the 1 stays where it is, the 8 stays where it is. The x to the negative 2, I'm going to move that up to the numerator, and it becomes x squared. The y to the negative 6, I'm going to move that up, that becomes positive 6. So now I'm going to simplify this, and I have x squared over y, to the 6th, over 8. And that's it. That's the final answer. Not too bad. So the last one I'm going to do is number 42, and let me write that down. So there are so many different ways that I could attack this problem. I'm just going to choose to, first I'm going to make sure I understand what I see, and then I'm going to deal with the negatives, exponents, and then I will deal with simplifying and applying the rule. Okay, so the first thing I want to realize is I have this entire thing, 3 times x, all being raised to the negative 3. And that's being multiplied by y to the 4th in the numerator. In the denominator, this negative, what that really means is negative 1 times x squared times y to the negative 6. So if I realize that's actually a negative 1 and I separate that from the x itself, that helps me to know what to do with the negative. So now let's examine each of these parts. This right here, this whole thing is being raised to the negative power, so that's going to have to move. Times y to the 4th, that's a positive exponent, so that can stay where it is. In the denominator, negative 1 is being raised to the invisible 1, so that's positive. Even though that the number itself is negative, its exponent is not negative. The exponent is a positive 1. This also has a positive exponent, so that's going to stay where it is. And this one has a negative exponent, so it's going to move. So now I'm going to move all the things that need to be moved and leave the other things behind. So I need to make this longer. This entire thing is moving. I just rewrote it, and now it's positive. Times negative 1. The y to the 4th stayed where it was. the -1 stayed where it was, the x stays where it is, and then y to the -6, that needs to move because it's negative. So now I don't have any more negative exponents. So now I can work with what I have. Let me first do the parentheses down here. So that's, I'm going to write it over here. So the parentheses said I had 3x that's raised to the third power. So I'm going to distribute that exponent. So I'm going to have 3 to the 3 and x to the 3 times -1 times x squared. That's my denominator. In the numerator, I have y to the 4th times y to the 6th. So next I'm going to work with my constants. So I have 3 to the 3rd power, that's 27, and a -1. So -1 times, I always multiply the numbers by each other, and that's -27. And now let's deal with the like bases. So y to the 4th times y to the 6th. Since I'm multiplying like bases, I add the exponents. That becomes y to the 10th. X and x. I'm multiplying like bases. So that becomes x to the 5th. And there's my final answer. Or I can write it like this, negative, because that negative down here can come out front, y to the 10th over 27x to the 5th. They're the same. So here are some general tips, and I know my handwriting is really poor, but I was trying to do this fast. It helps to deal with the negative exponents first, but not always. So it's not always the best thing to do, but it often helps. Just remember that if you have a number, if I had like 2x to the -1 over y to the -4, only the things with a negative exponent move. So that would be 2 over y to the 4th, 2 times y to the 4th over x to the 1. So, but that sometimes is the best thing, is just to move everything where it's supposed to be so it's no longer negative, and then work from there. Secondly is, if you have to rewrite it in expanded form to be able to simplify it, like if you have to write out the with the multiplication in between the way I did for number 42, then sometimes that helps. And the last thing, and this is really messy, I'm sorry, is that you really should take it one step at a time. If you notice my work, you know, I'm not trying to do a bunch of things in my head at once. I'm doing multiple steps, and I'm writing them down as I go to help avoid errors. And look at how many times I wrote it out here. The more you write it out, the more chance you have to maybe copy it down incorrectly. That's true, but if you don't write it out, then you're doing too much in your head. You can make a lot of mistakes. So those are my tips for that, and I hope that this helped. So good luck with your homework and keep practicing.